Приветствую всех на международной конференции.
Welcome everyone to this international conference. Our country, Russia, is currently going through a difficult period. I believe that the Russian system is evolving not from a democratic system, but from an authoritarian one because everything suggests that. We are currently under an authoritarian regime towards a totalitarian system. An authoritarian system is usually easy to spot. It is characterized by vague laws and opaque enforcement practices. In other words, everything is done to discourage citizens from expressing their opinions. And with the use of such vague legal language, any citizen could be considered a criminal or excluded from society. In fact, our legislation already contains many laws of this type. I will discuss this in more detail later. Today we are witnessing a trend towards the establishment of a totalitarian system, the signs of which are also evident in our country. For example, in terms of patriotism, if we take the military sector, we find everywhere the symbol Z, heightened patriotic feelings, political actions and compulsory participation in patriotic actions, for both children and adults. We see this widespread propaganda in preschool, kindergarten, and primary school. In schools, a program called Conversations on Important Topics is held weekly. Veterans and soldiers from the special operation in Ukraine come to share their glorious memories. What patriots they are and what a wonderful time they had there, and they display weapons of war, explaining that all of this is normal and even necessary. This is a kind of militaristic attack against our children. And all of this is shaped by an immature mindset, presented as the correct ideology, as the correct militarized way of thinking. Furthermore, if we consider the ideological approach, it is clear that in a totalitarian system, there is always a state-approved ideology that outlines traditional values enshrined in official documents. We have Government Resolution No. 423, which approves a state program with values, that is, a political course that clearly spells out everything a person, a citizen of our country, should consider correct traditional values and everything they should consider unacceptable. Of course, this creates an information vacuum, and this is media selectivity. There are practically no independent media left in our country. They've been eliminated. And, accordingly, we're now seeing mass blocking of social media in this context. We have adopted and amended, I would say, several key laws that now criminalize dissenting opinions. The most striking law here is undoubtedly the one concerning foreign agents. A foreign agent is defined as an individual or legal entity that has come under foreign influence or receives foreign support. The form of this influence or support is unknown and not specified. However, in practice, we see that any citizen, regardless of social status, can be considered such only if they engage in political activity, without any influence or support whatsoever. A citizen with this status does not have the right to participate in elections. He does not have the right to hold public office or to conduct educational or outreach activities. But the most interesting thing is that the law has an exception. Officials, political parties, religious associations, and state corporations cannot be considered foreign agents, even if they have direct evidence of this and proven influence. Can you imagine? That is, it turns out that they are completely outside the law. However, we know very well that many officials hold dual or triple citizenship, and that they have assets abroad of varying sizes. We also know that their children study abroad. Yet, no one has assigned them the status of foreign agent, and they are considered law-abiding citizens. There is also a very important law on fake news, disinformation, and discrediting the army. This practice is now punishable, even though, when this term was introduced into the Code of Administrative Offences, a recent term to sanction true disinformation, false information, defamation, experts truly thought they would now punish people for false information, for fakes, for slandering someone. But in reality, discredit is attributed. For example, if someone uses the word war instead of the word SVO, or special military operation, the word war is forbidden to be used these days, despite the fact that the president himself and many government officials use the term directly from television. Another very interesting fact is that the word discrimination can be used. And a person can be charged under this article even if they're telling the truth. That is, they haven't slandered anyone, they're telling the truth, they can back it up with facts. But the official media doesn't show it. It's not broadcast on television, it's simply an inconvenient truth. It's for this inconvenient truth that a person can be charged under this article. Another very important article. An amendment to Article 239 of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation concerns non-profit organizations and citizen initiative groups that incite to evade their civic obligations. This means, for example, that any person or organization that encourages others to evade their civic obligations is liable to prosecution, criminal. But the most troubling thing is that it is citizen-led organizations and groups that have advocated against mandate vaccination during the pandemic are now being prosecuted. Indeed, Article 323 of the law of the Russian Federation stipulates that vaccination is a matter of free choice, not an obligation. Nevertheless, those who campaigned against mandate vaccination, given the numerous cases of coercion, are being persecuted and are still victims of political persecution. Moreover, a person in our country can be labelled an extremist simply for criticising a public official. The law on extremism has been amended regarding interactions with civil servants, as they now form a distinct social class, public officials. If a citizen approaches an authority to discuss issues affecting their neighbourhood, or catches an official mishandling their duties, that official can sue them for inciting hatred. The law forbids expressing any hostility toward public servants. In reality, citizens aren't attacking the officials themselves but rather questioning the outcomes of their governance, essentially offering constructive criticism. Yet, the narrative is so distorted that even well-intentioned feedback, which should encourage accountability, is twisted to portray citizens as insulting officials. Amendments have also been made to laws concerning information access. Now, searching for extremist literature can lead to criminal charges even unknowingly, as the Justice Ministry's website lists 500 pages of such material by title alone. Nobody can memorize 500 pages of titles. So people have simply stopped seeking alternative information. I believe this law's true purpose is to deter independent research and push citizens to rely solely on state-approved media. Meanwhile, to maintain a semblance of information freedom in the country, the government developed the Max Messenger app. This application is considered a national platform. They even amended consumer protection laws, requiring that this app be pre-installed on all smartphones. But in reality, it is much more than just a messaging app. It is a tool for total population control. Because Max Messenger is a centralized platform, a registry compiling all of a person's data, information about their health, financial status, credit history, employment, and education flows in from various services. Every aspect of their life is concentrated in one place. It partially replaces passports and certs as a payment method. It is also an app used to track individuals based on their attitude toward the government and their political opinions. It is even utilized in the education sector for school communications and relations. Thus, a person is assigned a rating of social status which also functions as a control mechanism. At the same time, advertising for VPNs that allow access to messaging apps blocked by Roskomnadzor, Russia's media regulator, is prohibited in our country. Yet, it is worth noting that Roskomnadzor continues to manage its own Telegram channel after blocking it for the Russian population. So, what VPN does Roskomnadzor use if it has banned them all? A very interesting situation has arisen in the constitutional sector. The Russian constitution was controversially amended in 2020. It can hardly be called an adoption, as it was more of an approval. In fact, our constitution does not provide for an approval procedure. We have a clear referendum process for amendments, with participation thresholds, strict observer oversight, and a ban on altering officials' powers. But in our case, everything took a completely different turn. Parliament and the President had already drafted and coordinated the amendments. The President signed them, and citizens were simply called to approve them. With a single click, people voted for all 200 amendments at once, the entire package. It was impossible to reject just one. It was all or nothing. Either you voted for all 200 or rejected them all. The situation became so absurd that people were asked to vote from car trunks, playgrounds, park benches, and even tree stumps. Many of us witnessed this farce. Today, this mockery has been enshrined in the adopted constitution. The amendments concerning children are particularly alarming, as Article 76 now states that children are the property of the state. The next step was introducing amendments to laws regarding children and parents, in other words. Juvenile justice. Article 150 of the Criminal Code on Petty Offences was amended to include a specific provision targeting parents and teachers. It states that if a parent involves their child in criminal activity, they face penalties, including arrest and loss of parental rights. But the most troubling aspect is how this article is applied in practice. A child can be taken from their family for reasons as minor as picking an apple from a neighbor's tree, a petty offense, swimming in a prohibited area, or simply being spotted with their parent at an unauthorized public event. This is a blatant tool for controlling parents, who now fear engaging in public activities with their children. Additionally, parents with a low social rating are scrutinized, as family evaluations are already factored into school assessments. In the education sector, we are transitioning to remote learning due to a severe teacher shortage, unofficially estimated at over 50%, though officially reported as 25%. Therefore, everything is in place for distance learning. Simultaneously, Resolution 1678 is adopted, allowing school principals to unilaterally place a child in distance learning without prior authorization, effectively isolating them from society. Parents have no rights or protections in this case. It is an absolute power granted to the school principal. Of course, various reasons can be cited, such as family instability or the child's fragile health. Thus, even in the absence of a school quarantine, if the principal simply believes, for example, that the child poses a health risk, they can easily isolate them from society. This, of course, raises serious concerns, as parents often adopt certain behaviors to promote their child's social integration. Additionally, in the education sector, we have adopted Resolution 1006, an anti-terrorism regulation, which requires schools across the country to organize simulated terrorist attack drills. These exercises are intended, in their logic, to teach children not to fear terrorists. But what actually happens? Trained and camouflaged men, armed with real weapons, storm into schools as if it were a real terrorist attack, teaching children to hide under tables. Naturally, this has had the opposite effect. Cases of heart attacks, bedwetting, and severe stress have been reported. Children are afraid to go to school, they are stressed, as are the teachers. Parents, too, are highly stressed, wondering whether they should send their children to school after such incidents. At the same time, according to the NUGA standards, National Standards and Evacuation Law No. 68, parents no longer have the right to pick up their child from school in case of an emergency, whatever it may be, especially during an evacuation. No one will be able to simply retrieve their child and take them home, according to the new law. The parent is now considered someone who could potentially leak information to third parties. As assured by the ministry, parents can only watch as buses transport groups of children to an unknown destination. We were told that it is also forbidden to reveal where the children are taken. This is classified information, even though parents are not considered third parties. In this context, a question arises: where are our constitutional rights? Where has democracy gone, or local autonomy? In reality, they no longer exist, because even in the realm of local autonomy, we have undergone a radical transformation and a reform. This is the municipal reform, which, I believe, definitively excludes citizens from direct governance of their country, as, according to the new law, the status of rural municipalities is being abolished. You know that Russia is an agricultural country with many rural municipalities. The status of rural villages is disappearing, and they are being merged into municipal agglomerations administered by a single appointed official. This official, appointed by the regional head, personally oversees everything, including finances. As a result, residents of tourist areas, endowed with protected spaces, become mere employees serving tourists, and local autonomy no longer exists. As for disadvantaged areas, so to speak, unprofitable for the government system, they are withering away. Populations are leaving due to lack of funding and becoming marginalized on their own lands. Thus, the fundamental principle of democracy, local autonomy, local governance of one's country is not only violated but completely obliterated by this reform, which transforms it into an authoritarian regime where an external authority governs and, moreover, protects these local communities with law enforcement. Considering environmental issues, we all know that we have just passed a scandalous law allowing deforestation around Lake Baikal. There are practically no forests left in this area. In the buffer zone, cedars have almost disappeared. Yet, despite this, the law was passed, and it now permits the exploitation of primary forests without expertise, simply through the online approval of an official. With such remote decisions, thousands of hectares of protected areas can be cleared and sold abroad. In other words, we believe that this law is fundamentally harmful to the environment. It brings no environmental benefit. This law aims to permanently transfer World Heritage sites to private interests. Lake Baikal has been seriously ill for a long time, and experts and environmentalists are well aware of this. Not only is its water unfit for consumption, but swimming is also prohibited. And even access to certain areas is banned due to the proliferation of toxic algae along its shores. Yet, environmental activists fighting to protect Lake Baikal are either outlawed or subjected to persecution. A law aimed at removing the status of specially protected natural areas is currently being drafted and is already under consideration. This means that these areas, sanctuaries, national parks, nature reserves, and other spaces where the ecosystem remains intact could be liquidated at the whim of an oligarch, reclassified as luxury development zones, tourist complexes, and so on. This is not what the population truly needs, but it is what those who derive enormous profits from it require. And this phenomenon is even taking on an international dimension. In our country, there is a law called the Priority Development Area on Russian, TOR, which allows the complete transfer of a territory, along with its natural resources and associated assets, to foreign citizens under lease agreements. These territories, recognized as PDAS, have their own laws, codes, and regulations. In other words, they are true states within the state. Thus, foreign citizens become residents of these territories, which are typically prized for tourism or rich in natural resources. Over 70% of the national territory is already designated as PDA. It's truly a state within a state. On these territories, only the people remain, but ultimately stripped of their civil rights. A little more, and a totalitarian regime, so to speak, will fully establish itself in our daily lives. So, what can we do in all this? All we can do is unite, speak the truth, make it public, including at the international level, and offer a moral and ethical analysis of the actions of the power system. And I believe that the unification of civil society institutions is the only possible way to preserve the lives of citizens and, more broadly, the democratic constitutional order enshrined in our Constitution. Thank you very much.